Are they merely an urban myth? A number of exploitation films have been made, one so convincing the director nearly stood trial for murder. Snuff films. Do they exist? This is D.S. Yoxheimer, and I'm here to talk about another dark topic. Many would say the urban myth. Snuff films. There's been documentaries made about them. No one knows if it actually truly exists. The black market for films where people are murdered specifically for the sale and distribution thereof. And it's kind of born out of the 70s. They made a lot of exploitation films. One is actually called Snuff, they're usually with time now they look kind of fake, but they're fairly convincing, especially to an audience. 1970s audience, but some do indeed feel they exist, and it would make sense that they're marketable considering so many movies like Saw and Hostel and other sort of torture porn movies are very lucrative at the box office. Some other notable ones are Cannibal Holocaust, which is a movie that the director actually was nearly put on trial for murder for, until he proved that the movie was in fact fake and the actors that were in the film are alive. And I've seen that one, and it's pretty awful. It has. Well, I don't want to necessarily ruin it, but there is a famous scene towards the end of the film that it's most known for. It is. I mean, it's very disturbing, and it was made sort of a guerrilla style of shooting. It's about some documentarians that go to the jungle to document like a primitive culture that are cannibals, and they fuck with them and things go awry, obviously. Another snuff film, it was in the Japanese Guinea Pig series. It was the second one, in fact. It was called The Flower of Flesh and Blood, which was released in 1985, which depicts a really graphic scene of, and a lot of them do depict a woman getting killed. The movie Snuff and this depict it really explicitly. And Charlie Sheen saw this film in the early 90s and was so convinced by it that he contacted the FBI, and they opened an investigation into it. And of course Charlie Sheen, thinks that he would think that he's walking in circles where, someone he knows has a snuff film. So it doesn't shock me when they're, when he's speedballing heroin with these people, and they're like, "Hey man, I got this killer reel. It's totally a snuff film." But it's been talked about. There's a Nicolas Cage movie called 8mm from 1999, which he plays a I think it's a private detective. I'm not sure. And he seeks to authenticate it. I actually haven't seen them. Just was looking this film up. I don't think I've seen this movie. I'm not sure. It was a long time ago. I mean, the movie's 17 years old. I've seen a lot of Nick Cage movies, but I remember the movie 8mm, and he is seeking to authenticate an alleged snuff film that an old woman finds in her dead husband's things, because that's what you find after your husband dies, is a snuff film, not just like a stack of old Hustlers in a box in the garage. Anyway, but do they exist? I don't know. I mean, of all the crazy shit that goes on in this world, this whole country's turned into one big fucking snuff film, for God's sakes. It wouldn't doubt me that someone somewhere in the world is filming, people getting killed, for the purpose of distributing them to people who are presumably wealthy and will pay a lot of money for these films, killing people that probably no one will ever miss in some godforsaken country. So who knows? I hope they don't, but it's for how, all the sick, fucked up things that go on in this world. I mean, there's plenty of footage of people being killed. I mean, really, technically, the security footage from the Columbine High School is kind of, in a sense, a snuff film. Simply for the fact that you do see footage from inside the school while people are being killed, even though you don't really see anybody getting killed, but you do see the two killers in the scene in the cafeteria, so that is sort of compelling in a sense. But that movie, that wasn't intended. It wasn't a shot movie that where someone was getting murdered for the explicit purpose of selling and distributing that somehow. So, but people are fascinated and they are intrigued by murders and serial killers and stuff like that. So it wouldn't doubt me that people who are sick, twisted fucks, really rich people who would want to just have like a film like that and vault it away somewhere, talking to you, Donald Trump, someone like that. I don't know if he's into that. That would be fucked up to say, but it is kind of fucked up. I mean, we know that serial killers do in fact exist and they do this stuff, and some of them have filmed some of their exploits, some of their killings. So technically, I guess that's a snuff film, even though they're not. We're just talking about snuff films in terms of making it as a film to sell, not someone just making a video of themselves killing someone like a serial killer might do to keep as a memento for themselves. So technically, yeah, that is a snuff film. But as far as these films being sold for commercial purposes, I mean, no one's really ever, there hasn't really been a ring uncovered by anywhere in the world that does this, as far as I know. But we do, some people like watching this fucked up shit. I mean, I watch The Walking Dead. I look away a lot. I'm sort of, I do like horror movies, but some of the horror movies are more suspense oriented than they are just pure gore. Some of my friends, they like to watch horror films, and they like the gory shit like Saw and Hostel and the zombie movies. And I like the zombie movies. I like the old zombie movies. I like Night of the Living Dead. I like Dawn of the Dead. And those films were made kind of in the era where the myth of the snuff film sort of evolved in, and it's just, and there were a lot of other exploitation films in the 70s too, in the late 60s. Snuff is just something that kind of was one of the things that sort of sprung up in a way with like a lot of the like midnight movies and grindhouse films, and people would watch these, see some of these films and think, oh, someone actually got murdered, in the same way that because porn movies at the time were, in the early 70s, illegal to make, but they were showing them in theaters, and people are making actual porn movies where people are fucking, so they must, maybe these movies where it looks like someone's being murdered, they're actually being murdered. I think that sort of got into people's heads, and that's how this, evolved over time. And this is the era when this came out, is the era of film, you know. Um, not nowadays where we have the internet and I mean, God knows what's available on the, dark web or whatever, for purchase. I don't. The thing about it is though, if you're someone making these snuff films, it's very risky for you because you're committing murder and then you're finding a very trustworthy clientele who will buy these films, and it's like, okay, I'll make sure no one ever finds this. I mean, it's sort of, so that's kind of what dispels the myth a little bit that someone's just like, oh, here you go, here's a video of someone getting killed, and then somehow money has changed hands through Bitcoin or whatever, and somebody uploads or gets some kind of gets the movie and they have it, and I don't really and what thing is, what do you do with it once you do have something like that? It's like you call your buddies like, hey man, come over man, totally, you're gonna want to see this, and they sound like a surfer dude from California, I'm sure. But yeah, I don't personally, I don't think I think it's very, very possible that they exist, that someone has been selling these things somewhere in the world where it can be gotten away with. Maybe Kim Jong-un has like some snuff films, I'm sure. Especially, a ruthless dictator would do any, would be able to buy anything or have these films made for them for their own entertainment. I mean, God knows what that guy's into. I mean, look at our own president, for God's sakes. God knows what the fuck he's into, whether, Russian hookers, he has them urinate on him, and I mean, God only knows. I mean, all this other stuff is coming out about, Donald Trump, and even the evangelicals don't care that Stormy Daniels, a porn star, spanked him with a Forbes magazine with him on the cover of it, and then had her paid off with like $130,000. Well, an attorney did it, and Donald Trump had a pseudonym on the non-disclosure agreement that, of course, he didn't sign. But that has nothing to do with snuff films. It has to do with, like, corrupt world leaders. But with that said, I do think it's a good possibility that there's been this black market for these films, that it's existed for decades. But the only reason that makes me really doubt it is because to make something like that that could be traced back to you would be very risky. Even so there's other things to make money off of that are illegal, that like drugs and everything else. And I think that it would just be, it wouldn't really be worth it unless you were really just that kind of a sick person who also is business minded and wants to make money off this, and you're willing to take that risk to be caught making these films if one of them gets leaked and it gets traced back to them. So who knows, maybe someday that'll happen, but I wouldn't, I would never want to see something like this. I mean, when I was growing up, I've seen like Faces of Death, I think junior high, that came out, and as I learned, as I got older, some of the scenes in those movies, in that there were like a series of documentary films about different faces of death, different ways people die. And the one is the guy getting the electric chair, that was faked, as I learned. But it was fucked. It was a fucked up scene. It really was, and it was disturbing. It gave me goddamn nightmares. So I don't personally like watching, this kind of shit. I mean, even something depicting something like this. It's quite difficult. As a culture, we've gotten pretty comfortable with violence and in video games and in movies and films and TV. So, I was watching Psycho the other day, and the murder scene in that is just very implied, and it's meant to scare you, but it's not meant to. It's not gory. It's not really. It's no one gets mutilated in the scene or in any way, shape, or form. And I even watched Pet Sematary, which by today's standards is pretty tame, and it's a scary flick. And there is some gore in it, just because of, it was part of the plot, I think. So I don't think it was, I didn't think it was over the top or anything or obligatory, but it was, but that was actually, I think, a good flick. Which of course not a snuff film, but we do watch a lot of movies where characters are killed, and I think for some people they get such a perverse thrill out of seeing people getting killed in films or maybe in the news footage or whatever that the Zapruder film, JFK getting shot. Technically that's a snuff film for all intents and purposes. Even though I guess some, technically some people have maybe made some money off of it. I'm not too sure. But whoever, gets the rights to it, but it wasn't made, the guy shooting the film though, it wasn't being shot anticipating the president getting killed in it. So it doesn't meet the requirements of of an intentional snuff film. So but I guess that would qualify though, as far as I'm concerned. I think that's definitely in a very historic sense, that's the most historic snuff film, or footage of 9/11. All of it. It's technically, we're pretty, we've grown, I don't know, I wouldn't say comfortable, but we've grown accustomed to seeing a lot of death on the news and in television shows and in other, video games and in other media. And just, it's of course a part of life, but we've definitely, it does sort of disturb me that we've gotten so comfortable with death and nihilism and just with all of it, with the the spree shootings that go on and things like that. And I think that's what really frightens me so much about it. And why, the existence, even if I found out about the existence of a snuff film, if we did as a society, it came out and someone was busted selling this on the black market, it wouldn't shock us at this point, because of everything that's going on now. If you have any insights into this, you want to, leave comments below. Fucking scared of who's going to be commenting on this. And this has been another edition of The Spectre. My name is D.S. Yoxheimer. If you happen to see if you think you've seen a snuff film, I guess go to the FBI like Charlie Sheen did and be a good citizen.